Well, with the Spanish Grand Prix done, I better prepare myself for this weekend by eating 24 of these. Oh. Right. So the Spanish Grand Prix came by and it was surprisingly better than I expected, and that's to do with this first winner, turn 14. Getting rid of that silly little chicane turned out to be one of the best things the Spanish Grand Prix organisers could have done. It actually allowed drivers and cars to actually get a tow and do more overtakes into turn 1. It actually resulted in better racing and more competitiveness. It just made Spain all the more interesting. Then the next winner, obviously, is Max Verstappen. That was a total, utter masterclass. Even though he did get a black and white flag for track limits, that was mainly him actually just getting bored and sort of losing concentration. I remember one race, I think it was the Indianapolis Grand Prix, where Michael Schumacher was so far ahead, he actually span and just realized that, I'm supposed to be winning a race here. You just lose concentration when no one's really challenging you. The next winner should have to be Mercedes. Mercedes' upgrade turned out to actually be really, really good. And in the hands of Hamilton and Russell, who are both winners respectively, they actually have a car which can actually start to bridge the gap between themselves and Red Bull. You might argue that Aston might be that one, but they're sort of floundering. But again, I'll talk about more of them later. But Mercedes, that was really good. Their race pace is incredible, and their pace on the soft tyres is actually pretty commendable. The fact that Hamilton and Russell were actually feeling really solid on their tyres and not really worrying about it too much, really extending the stint on the soft tyres, meant they were all the more effective going into later in the race. And hearing Russell's banter on the radio was utterly charming. I think this is the first time since he went to Mercedes that he's been the most consistently happy. There's not really been something that he's had to be all super serious about. He's actually had some jokes on the radio. And Hamilton, now actually being back on form, and arguably the upgrades that they did were probably towards his benefit, but George just so happens to like it too, means that now we might be able to see some closer aspects of the 2021 battle with Verstappen, because maybe with the restrictions that Red Bull have, it might come back to bite them later, and if Mercedes are actually onto a winner and they can improve even further, and then with the W15 coming along, ooh, Mercedes might be back in play, and hopefully Aston come and join them for the ride, because we want 3 teams up there battling for the win, 6 potential drivers going for the top spot instead of just 2. Yeah, George, 9 places. He had a really miserable Q2, and then going onto the grid, the installation lap, he goes off. Same thing that happened to Checo, kinda. But no, he managed to go from 12th to 3rd. Checo was closing in on him towards the end of the race, but there was no real pressure from George. That's a really good one to keep an eye on, definitely. But Mercedes, good job. And then Red Bull, of course, mediums, where everyone else started on the softs, and they were still pulling away. That's crazy. I mean, what more do I need to say? That car, the RB19, is probably going to be arguably just as good as the W11. And now to somebody who I put in the dark pit last time out, Lance Stroll. Credit where credit's due here. Yes, he may not be the most personable driver on the grid, but if he does really well, you have to actually acknowledge it and accept that he had a good race. He had a good weekend. He out-qualified Fernando. Yes, Fernando actually damaged his car, but, points mean prizes at the end of the day, and Lance did a decent job in qualifying, really good job, and came home 6th. This is his equal best result of the season, and he didn't really put a foot wrong. So even though we do like to bag on him, it's important also to actually note when he actually does a good job. So that's important. Credit where credit's due. Not bad, Lance, not bad. Then another one I actually have to say, Oscar Piastri. I mean, come on. McLaren had a really good Saturday, and then it all fell apart. Their race pace still needs some work, but you got to admit that Oscar Piastri, getting him, that was a really masterful decision. In Q1, he was 2nd place in the middle of the session, long before track evolution was actually coming into play, and compound even further, him being the best rookie of the year by miles. I have to point out, on the 2nd stint, he was actually able to hang on to Checo. He kept within 3 or 4 seconds throughout the entire stint when he was on the softs. That MCL60 is good on its softs and on a cooler track. But then when it came to the mediums, yeah, that McLaren kind of fell apart and Oscar really couldn't do much with it. But on those soft tyres, he was able to hang on to Perez, and Perez being the master of tyre degradation, that is something really to take note of. Oscar, I think, is really going to push Lando going forward. Then another winner would have to be Yuki Tsunoda. I don't care what happened between him and Zhou. There was just no point giving him a 5-second penalty like that. There was plenty of runoff, and you could easily see that Zhou and Tsunoda, they were having a ding-dong battle into turn 1, and Zhou sort of gave up and then went to the escape road. There was plenty of ways to get back onto the track and then maybe try again. They weren't even close to making contact. Zhou could have just gone wide, then come back and then tried again on the next lap. But no, he actually got to go crying to the stewards, and that wasn't cool. I don't think that should have been a 5-second penalty. It's a racing incident, nobody got hurt, no damage was actually undertaken. If this had been gravel at turn 1 and then Zhou actually lost time, a lot of time to it, or maybe crashed out and beached it, then there might have been a penalty. But even then, it wasn't even an accident. So I really feel bad for Yuki. So he definitely deserves a winner. He should have had those 2 points. Then we have to get to the losers, and probably one of the biggest losers of the race was Lando Norris. Going from so high, getting P3 in quali when even he had no idea that he was going to get it, then colliding with Lewis at turn 1 and then completely ending his race. Sure, I don't think Lando would have gotten P3 in the race. That car on the medium tyre was not good at all. He probably would have slunk back to maybe P7, P8, he would have had an advantage being at the front, less ding-dong battles, and he would have been closer to Max, but even then, it would have just been in the lower half of the points bracket. You're not fighting Lewis, Lando. You should have probably let him have it, kind of try and hung onto the back of Lewis and maybe get a decent toe, so that wasn't a good look. But maybe he just couldn't see Lewis having to adjust to Lance Stroll in his mirrors, because Lance did get up to 3rd for a while, so maybe that was it. Then I would have to say Gasly, maybe? His initial performance was really good, and he got P4 in qualifying, and it makes you wonder what he would have done had he been actually further up the grid, like Ocon was in Monaco. And I think Gasly would have been challenging for the podium had he not been impeding and no communication there whatsoever. So, okay, that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but at least he did manage to score a point at the end of the day, so he did come away with something. So this is just a very, very small loser thing. It's just because he made a really silly mistake, and good thing he didn't get any penalty points, I'll just say that. Then you just have to actually say, Alonso is a loser. That mistake in Q1 where he went off and damaged the floor pretty much sums up his race, in that it was really kind of anonymous and he just really didn't have an answer. That AMR 23 with those upgrades, so far, they've really not got their head around them. But then again, this could be a whole new design philosophy which they need time to kind of fully understand. I kind of get that, and that would be fair enough, but Alonso didn't really have it until he went onto the hard tyres, where he was steaming through the field, and he would have got past Lance, but he decided not to attack him, and I think I might understand why. It's because Lance and he have actually come to blows with actual overtaking maneuvers in the past. Remember Austin last year, where one of them went flying? So maybe Fernando understands that not only is he the boss's son and he knows who writes his paychecks, but also Lance sometimes makes really foolish moves trying to hold on to a position, and maybe it's best not to antagonize him and actually get them both home to score points, instead of maybe Lance making a daring move, or maybe making a mistake where he spins out or something like that, or they collide so neither of them scores any points. Fernando just wanted to bring the cars home because they were clearly not going to get that many points, so this was kind of damage limitation. Fernando saw the bigger picture here, so I get that, but the rest of the time, nah. In comparison to what he'd actually been doing the rest of the season, this is definitely his worst weekend. But it's not a really bad one, to be fair. Then we got to talk about Ferrari here. Ferrari, oh dear. Those upgrades they actually put in, trying to actually make themselves closer to Red Bull's philosophy of car design, didn't really work, like I've said before. It might be just them understanding a brand new philosophy and concept of car, and that it might take time to adjust, but even then, to put something on the car and actually kind of not address the tyre degradation issue is a really big cause for concern. Charles Leclerc, unlike Checo, didn't really make that much headway in terms of getting back some points. Yes, of course, he started from 19th, but in that Ferrari, he should be able to get through the back markers because they are kind of further back in race pace, and maybe at least scored a point or two. Like, he was close, but not quite enough, whereas Checo did get all the way back up to 4th. And the pit stop strategies too. Charles going off of hards in 17 laps, where other teams were able to make softs last longer. That was a really weird choice, as well as Sainz's first stop, where even he was actually questioning it. So these pit stop strategies are just not working. They're really not helping, where the car is also not ideal. Then, short and sweet, Williams. They really didn't have anything to say at this race. They didn't really have that much downforce. Their top speed was good, but it turned out not to be as helpful as I thought it would be. Not even Albon could really make any magic happen and get a cheeky Q2 slot. They were quite easily the slowest team on the grid. But I don't think that they were the worst team in terms of overall performance. With Haas, their one-lap pace is okay, but when it comes to the race pace, I think they were the two cars that were overtaken the most because everyone just went steaming past them. Hülkenberg did get 7th in qualifying, but after that, he sort of fell backwards and he and Magnussen were just really near the end and just sort of losing positions all of the time. Whereas the Williams cars, they were clearly at the back, but at least they managed to maybe make a position here or there and then just stay where they were. Whereas Haas just kept going up and then down again. It was just not a good look. Sometimes if you know you're at the back, that's fine, you stay there. But if you have glimmers of hope where you might score a point, you might actually have a good chance and then it all falls apart and you end up 15th. That's probably all the more galling, honestly. Not to mention their pit stops. That rear jack, they really need to fix that. That happened twice. That Hülkenberg slow pit stop, ugh. And then just Bottas, just nothing. There's just absolutely nothing going on with him. Whereas Joe, even though he was a little bit of a tattletale on Tsunoda, he did score 2 points and then brings them level in terms of points they brought to Alpha. Bottas just doesn't really have anything. He's just a bit anonymous throughout an entire race. And yes, of course, his pit strategies were very questionable, but he didn't really have any responses, given that he's been a driver at a top-tier team for 5 years. You think that he would have actually gained some experience and be able to work something out, but no. It kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. Kind of like this lemon. See you around in the comments.